Live streaming is on.
Okay. Can you just confirm that we are live on the phone? Okay, good. So we are live. So
Live, okay.
hey everyone, uh, welcome to Spam PRs. So this is a session that we actually plan to do during Hacktoberfest. The main reason why we are doing this is to actually introduce you guys to actual interesting projects and actual, real people who are actually pushing the boundaries in terms of technology in their own way. And we think it will be a really interesting conversation. And we actually have quite a few nice people for you guys during these sessions. First, we have Emil Soman. He's actually the author of Fika Language. And welcome, Emil.
Thanks, Abraham.
So first of all, let me just apologize for not turning on my video because in my hometown from where I'm joining you guys, there's a pretty nice thunderstorm going on, and we don't have electricity. So if I turned on the video, you wouldn't be able to see me. But still, I hope you guys can hear me well. So let's just go with it. Emil, so how are you? How is things going on your end?
Things are going just the same. It's lockdown everywhere, so just stuck at home, writing programming language.
That sounds really fun. So tell a bit more about yourself, your education, like maybe your first year after college, first job, that sort of thing.
Okay, sure. So I got my CS, my computer science degree from Model Engineering College, Cochin, in 2009, and then I've uh, I've been writing code for other companies for like 10 years before I decided to start my own company, and then this company got accepted into YCombinator in 2019, and then a few months in the Silicon Valley, and then I'm back in Bangalore now. So right now I'm just working on Fika. So that I'm writing. I'm not going into details about my previous jobs.
Yeah, that's fine. Your
If you
network,
want to, we'll get there. Like if it.
you were
I'm sorry.
breaking up a little earlier. Now you're back, though. It's fine, I guess. Emil, can you hear me? Okay. Okay, he has joined the meeting. Emil, can you hear me now? Okay, your audio is. I couldn't hear you.
Yeah, I think now it should be fine.
Okay, yeah, sure. Now I can hear you.
Yeah, this
Okay.
happens. This happens
Yeah.
during video calls. I think one thing is we have normalized
Okay.
this. Like
So
during lockdown, everybody's on Zoom calls, and now we are kind of used to this. Like, can you hear me? All these things. So who did?
it's kind of funny.
Yeah. So did you hear me? Did you hear everything that I said?
Yeah, not everything exactly. We actually heard till your company got selected to YC, and after
Yeah.
that, sort of
Yeah.
started gardening.
After that, I'm. So after that, it's just nothing. It's basically now I'm writing Fika. So that was a very recent
Fika.
thing that happened. Yeah. So I'll
Yeah.
talk about.
So
Uh, I won't talk about the companies in detail, like the first company that I went to and everything, because it'll be boring for the audience.
sure, sure. Okay. Okay, now let's just go straight to Fika.
Okay.
What made you think, okay, there should be one another programming language. The world needs one another programming language. When did you come to that conclusion? How did you come to that conclusion?
Okay. So in my previous job, I was working as a software consultant. So for those of you, I'm sure a lot of you are students. So if you don't know what a software consultant does, it's basically it's like this. So if a company has a very specific problem to solve and they don't have the expertise to solve it, they bring in consultants to solve it for them. And after the job is done, they're gone. So you go, you solve a problem, and then you get out. You find a company, you solve a problem, then you get out. So it's like mercenaries for the software world. So yeah, so the thing is, when you do that for a lot of companies, then you start to see patterns, right? Things which are working, things which are not working. And also, one thing that software consultants see, they get to see, is basically the deep, dark secrets that nobody else sees in tech companies. The companies that build products that sit in our hands every day, right? I'm not talking about controversial stuff, but mostly things like technical debt and how badly code is written, right? But one thing that was shocking and even horrifying sometimes is to know that developers, they don't really trust their own code, the code that they write themselves, right? So why is that? So why do developers not trust their own creations? So this happens because of complexity mostly. It's when a code base is too big. Like one person physically, or they literally cannot imagine or think of all the use cases that are possible for the code to go through during runtime, right? The runtime is there are so many permutations and combinations that can happen during runtime, right? So compile time is something else. Like if your code compiles, that is something else. But if it runs, then it has to basically accept the request from the users, and the request can be in many different formats, and they interact in so many infinite different ways. So it's impossible for a developer to think about all the states possible during runtime in their head, right? So, so this is a problem. So what happens is they get scared to push anything to production. They have to think about how a piece of code would interact with something else in production before they push it. So what companies do, or what big organizations or enterprises do, is they try to solve this complexity by adding more complexity on top of it. So what I mean by that is what they do is they'll say, okay, so developers are scared to push code. So how do we solve it? Okay, what we'll do is we'll have meetings. We'll have meetings every day so that developers can talk about the changes and everybody understands what changes are going in. Which is okay, because now that we have meetings with every team that is working on different parts of the system, I can explain my change, like what will change in production, to the other team, and then they will understand how to integrate my change with their code. So it's magically working somehow. But one thing is, it's basically adding so much of complexity into the development workflow that programmers actually hate this whole process, right? It becomes very process oriented. It's not very productive to work in such environments. You cannot push something and get it live in production instantly. So, so it's actually a painful process to push something to production these days. This is what I was trying to solve. So how do we get what can I do to reduce this complexity, or basically help developers push confidently to production and make that whole process faster? So that's how the company that I started it. The whole vision was the same thing. It built a dev tool to solve this problem, but in a different way. But while doing that, when trying to sell this product to developers, because it was a dev tool, I was selling this to developers, the companies with developers. So then I got to understand a lot of problems that people currently have, the problems they have with a lot of things which things like Kubernetes and Docker and all these things, right? It's they've added so much of complexity to the stack that is very, very difficult for developers to be productive. So I kind of realized that this problem has to be tackled at a very lower level and not add to that complexity. So that's how I started working on that. Then I started thinking about programming languages. So when I applied to YC, there was, I think it is still there is something called request for startups. So request for startups is when YC asks people like people like us, to come up with an idea and then apply to YC. So it is what YC wants to fund. So when we applied, there was this category called DevTools, and there was this question. So what comes after a programming language? That's what they asked. So this question was always there with me when we built Docker and when we went to YC. Like what comes after programming language is still there. But then I was thinking, like, how should programming languages look like in 2020? Not what comes after programming language, but can we do something in programming language level? Like, can DevTools be better? Can DevTools be productive? So programming languages is another DevTool, right? So when we stand on shoulders of giants, does it make sense to sometimes think about giants and like make them better? So that was a question. That's how I got started with Fika.
So, but then again, why Erlang specifically? Why did you choose that as a base?
Why Erlang?
Yeah.
Okay, so Erlang is it's funny that Erlang has been around for a long time. It's been around for like, I think 30 years. And people only started realizing that Erlang has solved most of their problems, right? So until very recently, people were not aware of it. Like people like, I think people have been solving this complexity problem in a very different way, right? So if you look at different programming languages, what is out there, you can see interesting concepts from many different programming languages. Like you can learn something from Erlang, you can learn something from Haskell, you can learn something from Elm, you can learn something from every language, because every language has a nice feature. There is this feature that users love about that language. Like for example, Ruby is famous for the programmer happiness, right? It gives programmers happiness to write code in Ruby.
Kind of a friendly programming.
Yeah. So why is that? So and C++ is famous for the speed. It is really fast. And so you can get a lot of ideas from all these languages. So Erlang was, if you've seen that the introduction of Erlang, so the creators of Erlang created something called the Erlang the movie. It is basically the demo of Erlang, where they introduced Erlang as a language. The demo is basically when one of the founders calls another founder on the phone, and while the call is happening, they fix a bug, and the call doesn't get dropped, right? So if you think about what we do now, like imagine our current, like how we program in 2020, right? How we deploy apps in 2020. So this is so difficult in 2020. Like we cannot do this easily in 2020, right? Like today we cannot do it. So how we would do it is, we would have a running application and there is a bug. So what you do is, you'll fix the bug, you'll create another application, the entire application, then kill the whole thing, and then redirect the new request to this one, right? After it is tested that it works. So we've hidden all these things behind processes. So we created processes so that these things are normalized. But there was a technology that is like 30 years old, which is so good at handling network requests, like things that happen over the network. Like now, why is that important? That is important because we are in this age where we build everything for the internet. Like everything is on the network, right? So connections are, we have to deal with connections, right? And Erlang is so built for this. So it is built specifically to handle connections like what we do today, right? So a lot of new languages have attempted building like the language front end on the Erlang virtual machine, and Elixir is one of them. And Elixir is hugely popular these days because it is, first of all, it borrows a lot of ideas from Ruby, because the creator of Elixir, Joseph Allen, is actually a Ruby developer. He used to be a Ruby developer, right? So he understands what works for the Ruby world, and he adapted that into Erlang and basically created this new language, which has all these benefits of Erlang runtime, plus the nice syntax sugars, like all these happiness quotients that you get from Ruby and other languages. So why Erlang? The answer is because Erlang is suited, is perfect for what we are building, like web applications and things that should not go down, right? Things that should run like 100% of the time. So Fika, if you look at Fika, Fika is a language that is built for web applications. It helps you build things like anything that you would build with Ruby on Rails or the Django framework or something like that. Like things that should run on a server where users should send requests and the server should respond with responses, right? So Erlang is well suited for that.
Yep. So then again, another interesting choice that you've taken in this whole thing is, choosing the whole functional programming paradigm. So is Fika a functional programming language, like primarily, and why is it so? Like since most colleges today, most of us are familiar with object-oriented programming language. Why functional programming language?
So the for me, I mean, it's like a there is a lot of, it's a very opinionated topic. A lot of people would want to use object-oriented. They like object-oriented programming. And for me, I'm at this time in my career where the time that I've spent on functional programming, like professionally, has crossed the number of years that I've spent in object-oriented. So I've basically spent like now maybe around like 5 years using object-oriented programs like programming languages like C++, and Ruby, and now I'm like using Elixir mostly. So for me personally, the real reason why I like Elixir is, or any functional programming language over like any object-oriented programming language, is because it is easy to visualize the flow of data in functional programming languages, right?
Yep.
Because it's basically how data passes through functions. But in object-oriented programming languages,
everything is an object.
It's basically, they have abstract concepts like classes, inheritance, and all these things, right? So if you were to visualize something that is written in a file versus what happens in runtime, it is not a 1:1 representation, right? Because what you see in a file versus what is actually running in a computer is so different. Because during runtime, these things actually come to life, right? These objects actually are created during runtime. But in the files, you actually write these things like classes is what you write. So for programmers to like visualize how things would work, they have to think like a computer, right? And that is they have to think about how inheritance would actually work in production when a particular scenario happens, which is extremely hard. That is one thing. The second thing is, for me, functional languages are easier to change. For me, like if you ask me what is a good program, like if you look at a good program, how do I say it's a good program? For me, a good program is a program which is easy to delete. Like if I can delete it without affecting other parts of the programming, like other parts of the system, then it's a good program for me. Like how easy is it to delete something? So this is important because only then you can easily maintain this, right? A system, if you want to maintain it, it should be easy to change things. It should be able to take something off. Yeah, so functional languages are really good at that because there's this concept in functional languages that is purity. A pure function is when given the same inputs, the function always gives the same output, right? It doesn't have any other side effect in the external world. So this means a function does not leak. The function is basically self-contained. There is no effect of this function in the external world. That means I can take it out, right? Now this thing will fail to compile, but that's okay, because I basically removed a function. But this does not affect anything else, so I can easily delete this piece of code and change it. So like programs written using functional paradigm are easier to change, in my opinion. Now, why do we still with object-oriented languages? Like, why do we still teach them in colleges? I think it's because colleges have no idea how. I wouldn't say they have no idea, but the syllabus that we use, they're really outdated. They just have to update this, right? They just have to understand. They have to get an understanding of what really happens in a company. Like, how do these engineers actually become like programmers and actually build something for end users, right? So you have to be a bit.
The developer life cycle.
Sorry.
Yeah, the whole. I mean, I've always personally felt that the colleges and the syllabus is still in the unknown of the whole developer life cycle that happens around like once you step out of college. So it's mostly still bound to like learning a few concepts and not really aim towards building someone who's a professional who's actually working on a production level project.
Yeah, but I think it's always good to teach all the paradigms, no matter how useful
Yeah.
one will be, because there are so many companies out there building enormous applications on object-oriented languages, and there are so many other companies doing the same thing on functional languages. So it is good to know both, and it's important to teach both. But not teaching is not an excuse for us to not know them, right? So I think the main job of students is to go and pursue knowledge. They don't.
Explore.
Yeah, spoon feeding is not going to happen because there's so much of knowledge in this world that it is not go and find out what they really need to learn so that they become useful. Right?
Yep. So anyway, that was a very interesting, conversation. So like, okay, so right now you're developing Fika. So at the end of this whole process, when you actually put out a Fika 1.0, I mean, like a release where you are like it's production ready, or like it's ready for hacker use. At that point, what would Fika look like?
Okay. So to answer that, maybe I have to talk about like a little bit about the problem again. Okay, like to
Sure.
really nail down that actual problem. So um, the basic question is, how should the programming experience look like in 2020, right? So I mean, believe it or not, it is not good. It is still horrible. At least for me, it is horrible, right? So if you have ever run an npm install which spits out like 10,000 vulnerabilities in your projects and so many warnings,
Oh, God.
which nobody knows how to
Uh,
fix, and there is some error about a dependency which you didn't really have to solve. Right? It's supposed to be solved by somebody else because they included it, but now you have to
I
solve it
see.
because you're the one who ran npm install. So this kind of thing, right? It's basically the experience is not great. I'm not blaming npm, but I'm just giving an example of how
Hmm.
we've given up on a lot of things. Like people don't care about warnings and vulnerabilities, and people. What I mean to say is people are not confident about programming now. Like nobody knows how everything works. It's a miracle when something works. So
Just look at the memes.
yeah. So Joe, I'll borrow an anecdote from Joe Armstrong, who is the
Hmm.
creator of Erlang.
Okay.
So Joe Armstrong passed away in 2019. So
Hmm.
great guy. He was always active in the Erlang ecosystem, and he once gave a talk, and during the talk he was talking about his experience preparing for the talk. So he said that he wanted to create the presentation, the slides, using a JavaScript tool that he found on the internet. So he
Hmm.
got the tool, he installed the tool, and he tried to run this, and it spit out this big error message. You cannot understand what the error message was completely because it was so huge. But at the end, it said grunt not installed. That's what it said.
Hmm.
So he did not know what grunt was, so he googled what grunt was, and he installed it. Then it gave this long cryptic error message again. Now he was at its bit end, so he went on Twitter and he copy pasted that error message and asked his Twitter followers, "How do I fix this?" Somebody said, "Your grunt path is incorrect. That's why it is not working."
Okay.
So at this point, he gave up. He gave up the thought of using this tool. So I'm talking about Joe Armstrong, the creator of Erlang, creator of a programming language, giving up because a dev tool, a tool that is created for developers, failed. Like it didn't help him.
Okay. Yeah.
Now think about this. Think about this fact. Like we are inviting people from all walks of life. People like we invite students, we invite artists, we invite baristas, and we invite everybody to learn programming. Right? We want everybody to learn programming now. There are so many resources out there where we teach programming. And the promise is, if you learn programming, you get magical powers. You can automate things. You can make your life easier because of programming, right?
Yep.
It's true. You can create new things from programming, right?
Yep.
But what really awaits them, if you think about it, what really awaits them is not this magical land, but all these cryptic error messages and tools that get in their way, right?
Yep.
That should not happen. Like if Joe Armstrong, he got stuck with this small tool. Imagine the fate of all these other people that I was talking about for due to programming, right? So I think programming experience can be better. There is a lot of room for improvement, especially the tools that we use for creating programs, like programming languages and all other dev tools. So Fika is a programming language that it's not just a programming language. It's basically supposed to be a programming experience as a whole, right? So my experiment is, or my goal is to basically improve this entire experience. So it has two main goals actually. So if I were to release this as a production-ready language, it basically should satisfy these two things. So it should have the first goal is Fika should make it impossible to write code with runtime errors.
Yep.
So how is this? So it might sound ridiculous. How can a language promise the absence of runtime errors? Now, fortunately, there has been enough research that happened recently and over many years that led to so many other languages that came in, which now have this promise actually. There's this programming language called Elm. So Elm is a language that compiles to JavaScript, using which you can create front-end applications. So if you write programs in Elm, they guarantee a zero runtime errors property. So they have this property, right? So it is possible if you combine two properties of language. So one is purity. So like if every function returns the same thing, given the same input, right? Then there is no way a function can actually throw up an error during runtime, right? So how Fika is going to solve this is basically by combining two properties. One is it is going to be statically typed. That means during compile time, the compiler knows the return type of all the functions. So all the functions are already the return types are already validated during compile time. The second property of Fika is Fika should abstract away side effects away from the user land. So what I mean by that is programmers should not directly call things, like invoke things which have side effects, like opening a file, accessing the database, network calls, and things like that. Side effects can fail, like if you're opening a file or if you're accessing the network. So network is always fragile; it can always fail, right? So these are the things which will cause like runtime errors. So if you can abstract away all these things away from like the programmers' like programmers' functions, and let the language's runtime handle them, then it's fine, right? So we should handle side effects in a safe way. So this is something that Fika is researching right now. So we are looking at different languages and how they implement this. So this is the second thing. And the second major goal was, or should be that Fika should make it possible for a developer to not just write code and verify it works, but to deploy this to production, right? So right now, if you look at the way we deploy to production, as I said, it's a very complicated thing. So what we do is we package this into a Docker container, then you put it on Kubernetes, or you go to Heroku and deploy it. And companies make this so complicated that there are processes, like they have like meetings and everything. So it's so difficult to get correct code to production. But now that Fika guarantees that there won't be runtime errors, it should be very simple and straightforward to push something to production, right? So, so we are currently exploring a way where a developer's computer can be a part of the entire system. That production and development can be an integrated environment. And writing a function in development can instantly get deployed to production. That is something that we're exploring right now. So if it were to be production ready, I would say Fika as a language is not enough. I would want like Fika as an experience to be good. So the deployment, the tooling around Fika, like things like the capability to debug. So all these things are important. So only then it is actually production ready. But I wouldn't say the first version that people can try out is going to have all these things. It doesn't need to be like that, right? So the first goal is to make it usable, where you can write like simple programs, where students can experiment with this, where they can, like, imagine you are doing a major project in your college and you have to implement something like a library management system or something, right? So now you probably would use something like Ruby on Rails or Django or something, or maybe some people might even venture into like PHP or something. So I want Fika to be an alternative, where there is a language which gives you that productivity that other programming languages give, or maybe even better productivity than them. At the same time, you get safety and you can create your project much faster with this. And you don't have to jump all these hoops to get this to production, right? So it makes the whole experience better for you as a student to get your project done. So that should be a goal that is going to happen sooner than the production ready for the general public, right? So I would like to release this something like that, where I get feedback from people who use Fika and then use that to improve the language, instead of saying that I'm going to work on this for like 2 years and suddenly it is going to work for everybody, right? It doesn't work like that. We need to get feedback from the actual users.
True. So now again, so we are going into the whole scenario of like contribution to Fika. So before we actually step into that, I think an interesting or like a relevant subject is how did you get into programming, like making a programming language, or how did you actually prepare yourself, or what kind of skills did you actually, like concepts, more concepts did you actually get into before actually developing a programming language?
So this was very, I mean, I admit it, it's very scary to get started with something like this, because it is usually done by people who are like programming language experts, who have like PhDs in programming language theory, right? And I don't have any of these things. And the truth is, I'm not a programming language expert. So what I'm building right now is basically from my understanding of how a programming language should look like. And this means that the implementation of my type system is not based on any maybe the best research paper out there. But that is the beauty of open source. So my hope is that with open source, I'm able to get enough eyes on this project that it is always better with more eyes on this project. Like people can look at this code and improve it. So if I'm not a programming language expert, somebody else would be, who might be using Fika, right? So since I've made it open source, we already have many contributors like this who are really interested in what we are building at Fika, and we get like active participation from the community now. So that is encouraging, because now you don't have to be like the master of like the entire language. You just need to understand a few things, and there are other people to help you, right? So how did I prepare myself? I did a lot of research into how programming languages are implemented, like how compilers work. I brushed up on my compilers knowledge that I thought I learned in college. So things like that. But theory can only get you so far. I think to get something working is the beauty. So if you can hack together a language, like that's what we did. So like Fika was born during, like the actual code was written during the FOSS United hackathon called FOSS Hack 2020, right? So during those 2 days, we got the parser and the type checker and everything, and like a proper program could run and even serve like a web request. We got that far by combining like all of these things. But actually, the research happened since. I mean, I've been doing the research for a few months, nearly a year actually. So that's the thing. So things like programming language, there is a lot of thinking you do the actual code that you would write may not be that much, but there's a lot of thinking you have to do, looking at other projects basically.
Yep. So okay, so now the big question: how can people contribute to Fika right now? And what
Uh,
kind of contributions are you looking for, basically?
Sorry.
What kind of contribution are you looking for, basically? Because like there's documentation, there's tools around Fika, like you mentioned. So, like, what all are they available? Like what all can people do for you?
Okay, so in Fika, there are so many ways somebody or like a student can contribute actually. So actually, students are the best people to contribute to something like Fika because uh, it is a very it's a place where you can actually apply what you're learning at college. So you might be thinking, where would I apply my compiler's knowledge? Like if you're doing a computer science degree, you might be thinking,
Mm.
where would I even use these things like context-free grammars and the compilers, type systems, and all these things. So this is the place. So if you're looking to apply those things that you learned in college or you want to learn, then Fika is a great place to actually look at the research that is going on in this field and use it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one.
Yep.
Like improving the compiler in terms of like the type system it has, understanding the research that is happening, all these things. The other thing is, as I said, this is not just a language. This is the entire experience that Fika is trying to tackle. So there are things uh, like error messages. Like what kind of error messages should Fika show to the end users, right? So this
Yep.
has to do with a lot of thinking about the use cases, how the end user would use Fika, right? So it has to do
Mm-hmm.
with like documentation of functions and like all these things, right? It's not just a program that compiles, but program that actually helps you solve things, like when it goes wrong. So it has to do with documentation, thinking about the end user experience, all these things.
Mm-hmm.
That is another area: documentation, improving error messages, and all these things. And and also there is other unclear thing, that is evangelizing Fika. Like if you like what Fika stands for, like what it's trying to solve, then you can be actually like brand ambassadors of Fika and be involved in the community, help the growth of Fika by writing programs in it, in your college projects and all these things. So you can be evangelizers like that. But to be an open source contributor, I would say if you want to actually get your commit in Fika, the best way is to join our Discord uh,
Mm-hmm.
server. So there is a link on our README. So you just join the Discord and like uh, talk to the developers. So we have like a few contributors who are very active on Discord, and we welcome everybody, no matter how experienced they are. We in fact welcome students and people who don't know programming language theory, because that is a great chance for us to explain this concept in the layman terms, right? We can
Yep.
we can strip this down to the like the bare minimum. That helps us understand the concepts really well. If you can
Mm-hmm.
communicate those concepts in those ways, right? So we encourage that, and that helps in documenting what we are doing in a great way. Because when I go to, if you look at like source code of like maybe other languages, you probably wouldn't understand much. But the thing with Fika is it's supposed to be simple because we're not that great programmers, right? So we wrote it in a simple way that works for us.
Yep.
So yeah, so source code is going to be readable. If not, you can always talk to us on Discord.
Yep. Right. So at this point, you mentioned how Fika is open source, how it is actually pretty good. So in this whole sense, in a broader spectrum, do you think open source and the whole open source and free software, like discussion is still relevant, or has free software lost its, place in the world, or something like that? What do you actually, think about that?
Um, I think free software philosophy is absolutely relevant
Hmm.
even today,
Yep.
and it will be relevant, will be even more so in the future, actually.
Yeah.
So, and this is especially true for developer tools.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so why do I think so, right? So it is because the first thing, but let me talk about developer tools specifically because that's what I'm building, right?
Sure.
So, Fika is a developer tool that is going to be used by developers,
Yep.
and developers have this. Uh, I mean, there are these virtues of a good developer, right? So, so basically, a developer would want to be lazy. They want to make things, do more things for them without doing so much of effort. So,
Yeah.
if somebody uses Fika and Fika does something poorly, they would want to make it more efficient, or they would want to improve it. Now, developers can do it themselves because they know coding, right? So, making it open source gives this right to repair. So, if you find something faulty, now you have
Yep.
the right to repair it and
Yep.
submit a pull request so that this actually works. So making Fika open source is absolutely uh, okay. My electricity is gone, but I think it'll be back.
Right, we can hear you.
Yeah. So it's absolutely important for developer tools to be able to be modified by developers who use them.
Yep.
And also, I cannot think of using a programming language that is proprietary. Like if something is closed source, I cannot imagine using it to build a company because
Yep.
of many reasons, like vendor lock-in and the lack of trust I have on that proprietary code. So making it open is a great way for adoption for developers who know about this and adopt it. So, and again, as I said, I'm not an expert in programming language theory. So if a programming language expert gets to contribute to Fika, that is better for Fika. Fika will be better that way, right? So that is the second thing. Like open source makes software actually better, not just adoption, right? But the third most important, I think the most important thing is it actually paves the way for innovation. Now think about this, right? Uh, like human beings became the entire progress of human beings happened because humans
Sure.
can create tools. Like during the Stone Age,
Yep.
we actually created tools with stones, and using
Mhm.
that we created new tools. And using those tools, we
Yep.
created new tools, right? And eventually,
Yep.
we created things like the light bulb. I mean, electricity came in, and
Like a
light bulb.
computer.
Then we got the internet, and then we got Facebook,
Yeah.
and we got TikTok, and from there it's all downhill. But anyways, so we have created so many tools on top of other tools, right?
Sure.
So I don't know if you have done this. A lot of people, I've done this. So, like, have you ever uh, received a toy, like maybe a remote control toy when you were a child, and then
Oh yeah.
you got this motor,
Yeah.
and you took that motor and then plugged it into your cycle as a dynamo, and then connected an LED, and that emitted light. So you can repurpose things. You can take out parts and make it useful for something else. All these things, right? So imagine that toy company made that illegal and put that child in the jail if they did that, right? Now that would kill innovation. Now imagine the first person who actually invented the hammer using stones or something. They said that I have the patent on the hammer. You cannot build more tools with this, right?
Oh.
I doubt what human beings would have been without the hammer and without the ability to create new tools with that.
Hard
So,
to even imagine.
so I think uh, it is very important for innovation. Like imagine if all the research that happened was kept private and
Yep.
nobody else could get those research papers and build things on top of it. So that's the thing. So you have to make sure that innovation happens. For innovation, you have to keep things open source. Think about Git, for example. Right? So Linus created Git so that he could build Linux in a better way,
Yep.
right? Now,
Yep.
because it is open source, now because of Git, a lot of things happen. Like because of Git, GitHub happened, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Now, because of GitHub, a lot of new open source projects happen. So if you don't have the basic building blocks, then you cannot build new things on top of it, right?
True.
So in that regard, I think for innovation and for the progress of humanity, I think open source is a necessity.
Right. So again, the whole Hacktoberfest thing happened, and that is where we've been leading a little with this whole thing. So the whole thing happened, and rather than asking like why it happened, or like maybe discussing about what happened, I would like actually think about what we can do so that that doesn't happen again as a developer community. Right now, there's like right now this whole thing, there is this whole thing where developer communities have become these whole things where everyone is running after things they can show, like, yeah, I did this, I did that, and that has become something, and it might be turning into something toxic, and this sort of thing has led people to actually run behind things that they can actually show rather than actually learning something in the process. In like, oh, okay, I built this, I built that, and if you just ask, okay, why does that do that in your programming language, and they'll be like, maybe I don't know, I just saw this somewhere and I just implemented it. So this thing is, I feel it's toxic, but it is happening, and everything is about the bragging rights these days, and this sort of thing is actually pushing people to do these sort of things. So what do you think developer communities can do to improve this whole situation?
Hmm. Um, First of all, about what happened at Hacktoberfest,
Yeah.
and I mean, first of all, let me say that Fika didn't receive any spammy PRs for that
Hmm.
matter, because maybe because Fika is fairly new,
Yeah.
and maybe the people who actually search for projects, they wanted to submit this to older projects because they might be abandoned. Nobody would close the pull request so that they would get the T-shirt for free.
Yeah.
So that might have happened, but we did get a few comments on the issues,
Hmm.
but I wouldn't consider them spammy because it looked like they wanted to solve the issues. But I'm
Hmm.
sure that it happened because of Hacktoberfest, which is, I believe it was a good thing for our project because it got some visibility and some people might have discovered Fika that way. See, the thing is, we don't want Fika to be like, I don't want a lot of publicity for Fika right now, to be honest, because Fika is not ready with respect to all the features,
Yep.
considering the vision that Fika has, because Fika has very ambitious visions, and
Yep.
considering that it's not ready, right? So,
Hmm.
if people want to take Fika seriously, then it has to actually match the vision that it promises. So, I wanted to get at least to that level until I can make it public. So, but at the same time, I want contributions to Fika because only then Fika can reach that.
Yep.
So what I really wanted was developers who wanted to contribute to Fika would know about Fika. So I thought participating in Hacktoberfest would have been a good idea. So I labeled a few issues with Hacktoberfest,
Hmm.
and they got the attention that I think it deserved. It's not like spammy or anything like that. So I'm not
Hmm.
complaining about Hacktoberfest. And also, I think, so what is that? So let's take a step back. So why does Hacktoberfest exist? I
Yep.
think it exists for two reasons. One is it is marketing for the company behind Hacktoberfest. Also, uh, because they believe in open source, right? It is not just for marketing, but they also believe in open source because they want to promote open source, right? So, if Hacktoberfest is doing a little bit of work towards making open source better,
Hmm.
uh, then I think it's okay. Like some spam PRs are okay because unless you're getting like flooded with a lot of spam PRs, uh, then it's mostly uh, a problem that GitHub can solve, or maybe Hacktoberfest organizers can solve. But I think the vision
Hmm.
is good, so I don't think Hacktoberfest should be looked down upon because of this single incident, right? Because I think it does a magnificent job of promoting open source, right? So remember the like in my days, nobody did open source. Like doing open source it sounded so like geeky, right? You have to be like so. I mean, probably only like Linux kernel contributors did that, right? Opening pull request was not a thing in students back then. But now I think it's maybe Hacktoberfest has done a job where students are now open to the idea, even though there is a small group of people who would have tried to game the system. Now, what can we do
Hmm.
to stop it, right? Like, I think to understand how to stop it, maybe we have to think about why it is happening. Like, why do these people try to game the system? Um, so I think this has to do with, if I'm not wrong, I think this happened, like these spam peers happened like majorly from Indian students. A lot of Indian students did that.
Yeah.
And I think it happened because of a lot of, I mean, the way society works in India, right? Like if you think about the Indian population, there is always this rat race. Like the person who gets somewhere first, they get the pie, right? So the winner gets it all or something. Right? So if you look at the way people stand in queues or the traffic in India, right? Everybody wants to go first. They want to reach there first. Everybody's in a hurry, right? I think it has to do with the population, like people uh, having to compete with a lot of other people to get something. And this has been in our DNA for such a long time. Our parents have been teaching the children that they have to be selfish, they have to do something, they have to game the system to get what they want.
Yeah.
Right? So if you think about deep research, where you go deeper into a subject and learn computer science as a subject, and take your time to actually properly understand, I think that is a luxury, especially in India. Like think about uh, a guy or a girl uh, who have to feed their children, right? And they have to make ends meet. Now you're asking them to spend time researching about what they do at work, spend extra time on that, and do do the research that requires a lot of time and effort, and maybe even sacrificing the salary going for research and everything, right? So that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
For them, what matters is do what is required to get food on the plates, right? I need food, right? So see, this is a very so I think will slowly evolve because India has been like that for a long while. The people have been, there's a lot of uh, mouths to feed in India, right? But
True.
as developers find financial independence, right? When they have that luxury to think about mastering something, when they are motivated enough to pursue their dream, when their parents don't really stand in their way, then I think a lot of changes can happen, right? But I think one thing that can help is to show the way, right? So I don't think there are enough role models. Like we cannot see our friends or our classmates doing this. So it is very important that we show the way in some manner. Like, can we have conferences or workshops or all these meetups happening where people can see other people doing these things so that they can be inspired. So I think in that
Build a
way,
culture.
sorry,
Build a culture around this whole,
yeah. So let people see them first, right? Because nobody has seen it. Maybe they don't know the way. So show them the way, and then maybe they can choose for themselves, right? So I don't think this can be forced on them because of all these social factors that I was talking about. But at least there would be some people. There would be many, not some. Maybe there would be many people who might be okay with pissing off their parents and society and pursue their dreams, right? So maybe show them the way where people have done this before and encourage people to take this path that is less taken. So I think SDS is doing a great work in that regard, and so are many other communities which are coming up, which is a great thing. So this helps. So I think we have to do more of this.
So yeah, and we're about near our time. So one last question is, what would you actually want to say to students who are actually pursuing a computer science degree or actually interested in computer science?
Question, sorry.
They're interested in computer. They're starting out. Hello, can you hear me?
I lost you. Interested in what?
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now better?
Yeah.
Okay, so like they're interested in computer science and they're just starting out. So like, what would you like? You are at this point where you've worked and then you're now developing a program language. So, from your perspective, what advice would you give them?
Okay.
To put?
So for me, like as for me, if you ask me, I would say make the best use of your time by looking for problems to solve. Like get that experience, right? You need to find problems to solve. You have to uh, go and learn a lot of things yourself, because the way academics works in India right now, it's not that great as we discussed before, right? They don't teach you stuff that you might actually use at work. So you have to do the job of finding those tools that people use at work. Like, what are the editors that people use at work? What is the environment like at a programming job? And how do you collaborate with other programmers? So, like the meta stuff that you need for programming. So you have to. It'll be nice if you can polish that as a programmer, right? So if you think about anybody like a carpenter or an electrician, so there are these tricks of the trade you have to learn, right? It's not just the theory that you learn. So try to get experience in that regard. Try doing more projects, not just the projects that the colleges ask you to do, right? Try doing again the electricity runoff. Anyways, so try doing projects that you genuinely are interested in. So do that. That is the first thing. And the second thing is try to make more friends, right? Find other programmers like you or people who are better than you. So it is important to form a network while in college, because that is the best place for you to find other people that you can potentially work with in the future, right? If you're going to start a company, probably these are the people that you will talk to, right? So it is very important for you to find those people who might think like you, the people who might venture into something with you, right? So I think this is very important. I think this is something that Indians lack a lot. You probably find this only in a very few colleges. Maybe IITs have this because they have this nice ecosystem of startups and everything. And I think a lot of new colleges are doing this, but do this more, right?
Yeah. So, yep. Anyways, Emil, thanks for joining us in today's session. It was a really wonderful session. I hope everyone who was listening to us and watching us actually loved it. And thanks in general. And it's not often that we get someone who is actually developing a programming language and is an Indian to talk to. So that's really been great.
Thanks, Abra. Thanks for inviting me to this.
Yep. So that was our first session. I hope everyone loved it. We'll be back with another session. We have more speakers planned. And thanks for listening in to us. And have a good day. Thank you.